you that.
All right.
Kinderhook Creek, Groundhog Hill.
Fish Patch Falls. It's also a very loved place.
Cool. Well, I don't see quite as many people joining us. So let's go ahead and get started, and folks can join later if they are running a little late. But yeah, hi, welcome. My name is Sam Calhoun. I'm the Conservation Programs Manager at CLC. I've been with CLC for about 5 years, and my role at the organization is really focused on conservation projects, conservation easements, and acquisitions of property, really the land protection aspect of CLC's work, which is just a part of what CLC does broadly, but is really the focus of our conversation tonight. I'm also sort of the staff lead on the development of what we're calling our Countywide Conservation Plan, which is sort of an open space plan of sorts focused on creating a shared conservation vision for the county, really to inform CLC's land protection work going forward, but also to create a tool that we hope is helpful for municipalities and communities in Columbia County, as well as many of our partners and folks that we work with to advance conservation in the county. And so I thought I would just start tonight by contextualizing our desire to create a countywide conservation plan, and share a little bit about what our goals are in the development of this plan. And then later on in the evening, with help from Geeta and Jen and Elliot, who are on the call from Thread Collective, we'll sort of dive into more of how public input is going to play a role in this process, and what that planning process will look like going forward. So really quick, I just want to mention, so in the most recent CLC organizational strategic plan, we identified sort of 3 core values or pillars that CLC wants to approach our work with. And those 3 things were connect, care, and conserve. And just to touch on each briefly, really connect, connecting with land in meaningful ways on our own sites, using those sites. I'm sure many of you have visited them around the county, as evidenced in the chat, for recreation, demonstration of sort of land management techniques, education programs, however you meaningfully engage with land, we want to foster and facilitate that connection to lands. The second is care, and that's really focused on promoting a conservation ethic in our communities and with individuals around the county. So how do we go beyond just connecting with land, but actually acting upon the land, and that may be inspiring people to approach management of their own lands differently, or changing the way they interact with lands around the county, whether that be to promote things like clean water or climate resiliency, or increasing native species, biodiversity, things like that. Really about working with folks in our communities, landowners or land users, to foster an attitude of sort of caring about land. And then thirdly, and the sort of pillar or value that we're really focused on tonight, is conserve. And that really addresses CLC's land protection work. And we strive to have our land protection work be very strategic and purposeful and impactful for the county. And we do that through easements and acquisitions of land for public use and public access. And increasingly, we really want to focus our land protection work on community needs and being responsive to community values. So where in the county do people see value? What lands do they want to see protected? And where does it make sense for CLC to continue to pursue land protection work? And so to support this work, CLC received a grant through the Hudson River Estuary Program to develop a countywide conservation plan with the goals of identifying conservation priorities throughout the county based really primarily on one sort of scientific data, ecological data, where is the, where are the critical habitats, where are the best farmland soils, where are the most important waterways. So using that scientific data and coupling it with public input, which is really what we're here to do tonight. So for me, that's a really critical element of developing a plan like this is getting that public feedback, finding out what our community values, and then turning that into priorities for both CLC's future land protection work, but also work around the county with municipalities and other partners. The other sort of goal that I have for this project, and I think CLC would love to see come out of the development of our plan, is something that's very actionable and has community buy-in, and that's another sort of reason why we're all gathered here tonight, and we'll have a couple more of these public sessions where we'll have an opportunity to hear from community members and gather data around priorities. We never do our work alone, and so we're always working, in communities, in partnership with other organizations or municipalities. So making sure that our future land protection work speaks to, the values in our community is critical as we continue to advance conservation around the county. So that's my quick sort of contextualization of our plan and where we're going. And I think I'll just turn it over to Gita and Jen and Elliot to sort of walk us through the rest of the evening, and I'll be around. I'll probably hear from you again. But yeah.
Thanks, Sam. I'm going to pick it up from there. So tonight we are going to do a little bit of sort of presentation at this beginning section to introduce you to both the team and to sort of lay the groundwork so that way we all are on the same page. We're thrilled to have almost 70, participants here, with a lot more registered, hopefully listening in. And so we will sort of go through the process and understand sort of what does conservation sort of mean. And then the second half will be much more interactive, getting your input. This is only the first public meeting of 4 that are scheduled throughout the process, with the other ones hopefully being much more interactive as we really dig into the sort of meat and the input. So this will be sort of the most informational side of all of them. We are rolling out a survey, so we'll be doing a very short survey as a part of the sort of session when we get into the breakout rooms. And then we'll sort of go over what the next steps are. And we are really hoping that all of you that are here today join us for the entire process, which will be starting sort of with you guys today and then going all the way through October. So we're hoping to finalize the conservation plan before the end of the year rolls out. So maybe with that, we can go to the next. Just to introduce ourselves, we're super excited to be participating with CLC and the residents of Columbia County. I am Geeta Nandan, Elliot Maltby is here, Jennifer Esser. Unfortunately, Martin is sick, so he can't be here, but we are an integrated urban planning, architecture, design firm, and we're really focused on ecological systems and understanding their impacts on the built environment and the built environment on the impacts on ecologies, and understanding sort of that go-between and looking at these systems from these multiple benefits and having a multi-scalar perspective. I'm both an urban planner and an architect. Elliot Maltby is a trained landscape designer and urban planner and has been looking at research through hidden ecologies and understanding sort of social and cultural practices, sort of that relationship between plants and people. And she's also a founder of the Masters of Landscape department that recently started at Pratt Institute. And Jennifer hails from Vermont and is joining us as a dedicated advocate for sort of the wildness of nature. She's a member of the Vermont Alliance for Half Earth and is on the editorial board for the Wild Earth magazine. She's worked on a wide variety of conservation projects and conservation plans, and is co-chair of the Huntington Conservation Commission, working with town boards around conservation issues. I think for us also, we want to explain that we're not just sitting on this side. We're very often a part of the community that is going through these processes. I'm doing one right now in a community I live in. So we look at this very much from the perspective of both sides and understanding that the input process is absolutely key. Like, we really are here to shepherd the process, hear your input, hear your voice, and take that into sort of the entire sort of larger project and perspective. We also have an office up in Newburgh, so we're a part of the Hudson Valley, and we're very familiar with the region. Columbia County is a very special place, so we're very excited to be here. And with that, I think we can, and we're very accessible too. So through Sam, just know that we're here. Columbia County has 23 municipalities. It's a very interesting county in that it goes from a pretty urban condition at the south to a much more rural condition at the north, from the Hudson on the west to the sort of more Berkshire Mountains on the east, and has a really wide variety of different ecological systems. And for us, a county-wide plan obviously means that we are going to really be mindful about how do we solicit input from across the county, and how do we ensure that the conservation plan is actionable at every one of these municipalities. And I think, to Sam's point, for us, in this day and age where we are with climate change in the world, for us, taking action is really, really important. And a plan is a living document for us, and thinking about how that living document will be realized on the ground, and really taking that countywide scale and making sure that it's applicable to each and every one of these municipalities is very important to us. And just to go through, yeah, we can go to the next slide, Elliot. Our values, hopefully we share these values with the residents in Columbia County, really understanding perspectives and site specificity. We will be going through a series of data exercises, and that will be presented at the next community or public input session, where we're doing a mapping exercise, but data is really key. But we don't have all the data, and so we'll be talking a little bit about how we're gonna need to gather additional data. Community focus, like we said, that's a critical aspect of it. Climate and resilience, we've heard over and over again, and we share that's a really important thing to be thinking future or forward future thinking, to be able to understand how conservation today will have an impact, say, from 100 years from now. We do bring the sort of understanding of development. Our firm also does architecture and built environment work, and so we understand that the pressures are there, and looking at what that balance is. And farming and food as a natural resource is a key element for conservation, and equity and diversity is not last on this list. It's actually, pretty important. And we consider it to be integrated actually into all of the considerations. So for us, it just sort of is an issue that comes to the fore throughout. And that, I'll turn it over to Elliot and Niffer.
Yeah, I'm up next. Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Esser, and great to see so much engagement in your region. About 70 people participating, which is wonderful. What is a conservation plan? Well, Sam covered that a little bit, as Nandita covered a little bit of it too, but I'm going to kind of just give some basics for folks who may not be familiar. This first slide here shows examples of two plans that are kind of specific in their approach. A conservation plan is generally a guiding document that helps inform our conservation actions. And so it's a vision for the future, and typically it's a vision of the future ecological health of a region. Here again, we've got some examples of some more specific conservation plans: the Food Shed Conservation Plan for the Hudson Valley from Scenic Hudson, and the Outdoor and Forest-Based Recreation Plan that was put together in the town I live in, Huntington, Vermont. And that plan was had a great outcome, which was ultimately helped us get a new community forest in our town that gave people access to the kinds of trails they were looking for, walking trails and bike trails. And it also gave folks access to the river. And the plan was just critical because it was used with funders. It was used as sort of a justification for why we needed to purchase this large parcel in our community. So a good example of an action and outcome from a conservation plan. Next slide. So the Rensselaer Land Trust describes their county conservation plan not as a blueprint, but as a green print of land and water conservation priorities in the county. I thought that was kind of cute, the green print. But essentially a conservation plan, it really aggregates various pieces. The first piece is usually ecological data. And Elliot's going to explain a little bit more about this soon. She's going to share some more information about the GIS consultant who's working on the project with us. And this ecological data includes typically identifying and mapping natural resources. It, of course, also includes input from stakeholder or advisory groups. These are like the municipalities and other organizations, which we're also working with. But it also includes, of course, public input. And so your values, your concerns, your vision, these are important drivers to make sure that the plan meets the needs not only of the Columbia Land Conservancy, but of the community as well. And so it integrates important ecological values with community values around conservation. And in my mind, it's also kind of an opportunity to scale out a bit and have a little bit of a wider lens, and like looking at the entire county and even a little bit outside the county to think about connectivity across the larger landscape across the region. And then that broader perspective, we can kind of see how all the pieces fit together. And a conservation plan would also include goals and objectives. This could be something, for example, like protecting a certain percentage of a habitat type, such as forests or wetlands. And finally, it's an action plan. It includes strategies and tools that will help CLC, but also, as Sam mentioned, the goal is to also help organizations, municipalities, and landowners prioritize their conservation actions. So that could be protecting specific parcels of land with easements or acquisitions, or providing access to a particular type of outdoor recreation, or advocating for certain practices or regulations. So some of the questions that we're asking are, what are the threats to the ecological health of this region? What values do we want to protect? How do we get there? So a conservation plan really provides an action plan to achieve our conservation goals. And I just want to acknowledge the political context that we're in right now, which has shifted and is maybe a little bit challenging to conservation. So I would just say it's a time where it is very important to listen to each other, but it's also important to voice or stand up for our values. And and if that's advocating for protecting wild nature, this is sort of an opportunity to speak out and express your values and stand up for what you believe in. So I believe that Elliot, you're up next.
Well, I'm gonna be a pivot point and segue, which is to say the other thing for us to think about at this moment in time is to take stock of our successes and remember that we actually are gaining traction, that there is movement forward, and that ultimately the success of this is building on work that's been done thus far. This is not, of course, not operating in a vacuum. It's building on work that the CLC has been doing for quite some time, along with the adjacent counties. So that is a little bit of a setup for Sam to pop in for a moment, join us, and to speak to a couple of projects that have been completed recently. And then we'll transition to talk a little bit more about the resource process of the conservation plan.
Great, thanks, Elliot. Yeah, so just like a moment, like Elliot said, just take stock of where we're at and sort of appreciate the success that we've had in Columbia County around conservation and acknowledge it in some way. So on the right side of your screen, you'll see our CLC's protected lands map, which includes lands that CLC has protected in the county through easements, lands that we own and operate for public recreation, as well as other lands that are protected in the county by other conservation organizations and lands owned by public entities like the state or municipalities. So it's a pretty robust map of protected lands in the county. In terms of CLC's specific accomplishments to date, we're upwards of 30,000 acres of protected lands across the county. And we own 10 properties for public recreation that total over 4,000 acres. And there's a lot more protected land around the county in the form of state parks and other privately protected lands from other organizations. So we really have done a lot of good work, and I think to the value of this plan, it's a vision forward of where specifically are the most important places, or how can we be more strategic about the way we're going about protecting land, so that we're sort of filling in the gaps on this map in a way that's really impactful and meaningful and aligns both with sort of CLC's values and also our community's values. And then really quickly, just wanted to mention like 2 recent conservation wins that CLC has had. The first, and you'll see pictures on the left, is a project that we completed with Husman Hollow Flower Farm. It was a small farm property that was donated to CLC. We protected it with a conservation easement and resold it to a farmer at an affordable price. And that farmer now owns and operates on that property and is really an incredible project, and happy to see it finished. And the other one that maybe you folks have heard of on the call is our recent project at Semascot Orchards, where we protected 500 plus acres of really valuable farmland right in the village of Kinderhook. So these are the kind of projects that CLC is continuing to pursue and is actively engaged in, in the present moment. And so we hope that we can continue to find projects like these that seem to really align with CLC's values, but also with community needs and respond to community needs. And yeah, so I'll pass it back to Elliot, but just wanted to share.
All right, so where are we in this grand scheme of things? We are in the research phase. That's sort of where we begin. As Jennifer noted, this really is a process of assessing resources. So those are both information resources and natural resources. A couple of examples of things that we're looking at right now that are particularly inspiring. And we are thinking about putting together, to note, a set of resources. Someone asked about the map from the previous slide, along with some of the key resources that we're looking at as a shared folder that, if you want to dig in deeper on any of these, you are certainly welcome to. On this slide, as I noted, are a handful of things that have been particularly impactful as we start to shape the way that we're approaching things. One is a report that's actually prepared for the CLC, Journey into Pre-Colonial era, looking at the kind of historical perspective on the landscape, understanding indigenous land stewardship practices, both from a perspective of signage, potentially, something that they're working on right now, but also looking at how we might translate as we look to the future. We're looking at municipal resources again. What is happening at the local scale already? How can we build upon that? On the lower left-hand side here is the town of Stuyvesant's map of their protected lands. Another CLC document from 2018, which is a natural resources inventory. Fantastic, totally chock full of information document. And then looking a little bit further afield, as we noted, we are not an isolated entity. This, our political boundaries are one way of framing the landscape. Of course, the landscape has its own thresholds and interconnectivities. So we can even look at Connecticut, for instance. I like what this particular report is looking at, which is how do we accelerate the pace of conservation? So again, looking, how do we get this stuff really in play? We know that we could spend the rest of our lives just reading reports, but ultimately, how do those reports create change on the ground? And these folks are looking at quasi-protected lands. Like, what are the strategies for lands that aren't protected? I think that's a really interesting question. And then also using an index of ecological integrity. These are one of the ways to think about what's a strategic approach to acquiring new lands, or bringing new lands, not just protected, but broadly. How do we approach land holistically? As noted, we do have a collaborator in the project as a whole who is the GIS expert. I'll note that he was the GIS expert and specialist for the Rensselaer conservation plan that Jennifer noted earlier. And he prepared this little kind of little simplistic not necessarily preamble, was the word I'm looking for, but basically an example of the kind of mapping that he's working on currently. So this is how kind of one way that scoring works. So there's both a kind of a notion of stacking. Where are these hot spots? What we've got here is water and wetlands, buffer zones, natural heritage communities, core forests, and the New York Natural Heritage Program, important areas. So this is like kind of each of those gets layered on top of each other. And on the right-hand corner is this kind of heat map of where there's concentrated conditions of those various categories that I just described. This doesn't have a weighting. There's another way in which we start to analyze this information. So this is sort of the first pass. But I think a good example of the complexity and nuance that gets brought to the kind of classic tools of mapping. Also, just to also maybe peek under the hood a bit in terms of GIS, this is not a very sexy slide, but gives you a broad range of data sets that are being pulled together. We're not necessarily using all of these. These aren't necessarily the be all and end all of data sets that will be used in the preparation of maps that you'll be seeing if you come to the public meeting next time. That said, we're also, one of the key parts of the conversation with you is identifying gaps that are not going to be mapped, information that doesn't inherently lend itself to mapping, and then some of which can be translated to a spatial condition. So we have the opportunity, if we identify some very particular questions, to develop new data sets that would be included in this research as well. So the public component fills in and identifies gaps that are both elusive from a mapping perspective, but where we also add additional layers into the mapping process. All right, I will pass it to Gita to continue to talk about this process.
Great. We're getting close to the break.
We're getting close.
But we just wanted to be, we just wanted to let you guys know also that there are these other opportunities for input. And so there is an advisory group. The advisory group we're meeting with on a sort of quarterly basis, as you can see here. What we get from the public meetings, we will then take back and sort of present to the advisory group that they'll then inform the next set of meetings. So there's sort of like a back and forth between the two. And May 3rd, we will be having our first scheduled in-person input session. That will likely be sort of where we're really talking about geospatial conditions. Maps will be out, will be sort of available for a full day. Hopefully a lot of people will join us and really talk to us in much more detail about the specifics of locations and sites and how we are looking at the mapping aspect of the conservation plan. And then in June, we'll be hosting another in-person session that will be where the plan is starting to take shape. We'll be presenting some of the recommendations and the actions. And then there'll be a date in the fall where we'll be looking at more of the final production, and we'll have the general public have an opportunity to have a presentation on what the final is looking like in terms of the conservation plan, and then getting your input on that as well. Obviously, public participation is really key for us. We just went over some of the ideas around public workshops. We will be also hosting a survey, and that survey will be just ongoing throughout the process to really inform and get a much broader perspective and broader voice for those people who may not be able to attend or sort of want to give additional information. So that survey, hopefully the general public will also be able to help us just get that broadcast out into sort of every nook and cranny of Columbia County as possible. And then we'll also be doing a couple of walking tours. We'll be coordinating with Sam and the CLC to determine sort of where that might be best situated. But we love meeting, people and actually walking sites and really getting to know the details. So through those walking tours, we are able to ascertain just a whole nother level of information. And so we'll be looking forward to, in the warmer weather, doing a couple of walking tours in some key locations where we'll be able to really test and understand how the conservation plan might be able to play out. All right, and then what we are doing next. So we are going to randomly assign everybody to a breakout room. And once you get into that breakout room, you'll receive a link to a survey. So you can sort of take a break, you can do the survey, and then we'll be joining sort of a discussion around sort of your perspective on conservation in terms of what you see the challenges are, what do you see as the benefits, and how do you sort of see that playing out within your personal area, the place that you live. And then sort of talking about some of the successes that you see around land conservation as well. So the three groups will be cultural conservation, water conservation, and habitat and species conservation. And each breakout room will be focused on one, although that being said, if you feel really passionate about bringing up some subject matters related to the other ones, that's perfectly fine too. I don't know, Elliot and Jennifer, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's great. I was thinking we might assign a time. I know, Jennifer, you were thinking that's a smart idea. So it's 6:38 right now. Maybe we say 6:50. How is that timing wise is that okay? Too much time?
Can you go back to the previous slide, actually, so we can see the, I thought we were going to break for a half an hour and go into our rooms and then do the survey.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I think Elliot's saying 10 minutes for the survey.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so everyone's going to be assigned a room.
Yep.
We'll give you the survey link right away, and then we'll reconvene. You'll do the survey, grab yourself some water, cup of tea, whatever you need, and then we'll have the discussion starting at 6:50.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we'll be back as a large group starting at 7:10.
Yeah.
Okay.
7:20. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. We'll put the survey link in the chat. And then there's a QR code too. Maybe Elliot hop onto the QR code if anybody wants to do it like on their phone instead. You can hold up your phone right now and get the QR code. And then these questions will also be available in the larger survey as we roll out a bigger survey in a couple weeks.
Yeah, just to clarify, this isn't the larger survey that we plan on doing. This is just sort of a preliminary survey that will help maybe shape our discussion, but also shape, you know, some of the future meetings.
Yeah.
And the future survey.
Great.
If we don't scan this code, we'll still see the survey in the breakout room.
Yep,
Correct. Don't
exactly.
worry.
There'll be a link in the chat.
Exactly.
Yep.
And we can put it in the chat right now as well too for folks.
Yep. There you go.
Great.
Super. And with that, I think we'll turn it over to Sam to do this magic breakout room, which I always find astonishing when we all disappear.
All right, here goes nothing.
And I'm gonna just assign us. Elliot, you'll be
Yeah.
in room 1.
Wait, so what are we doing? I couldn't remember, 20 minutes or half an hour? Like,
Well, it was 20-minute discussion plus 10 minutes for the survey.
thank you. All right.
Yeah.
So we'll at 7:10, we should all meet back together.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna assign you guys. Sam, are you Rachel Hopkins?
No, I'm info at Columbia Land Conservancy.
Oh, Rachel's a co-host?
Oh, Rachel is a coworker of ours, so they probably have
Okay.
special privileges in our Zoom account. I didn't think
Okay,
about that.
gotcha. I just wanted to make sure I was. And then I'm gonna assign myself room 3. Although, why don't I see myself?
You're up at the top for me, unassigned. I could assign you to room
Yeah,
3
can
if
you
that-
assign me for some reason? I can't. Thank you. I'll see you later.
Yeah. Those of you still in the main room, you should see an invitation on your Zoom to join a room, but if you don't, let me know and I can put you in one. Rachel, let me know if you want to join a random room.
You are welcome to assign me. My Zoom wasn't working, so I just used the main account, which obviously
Yeah, no
worked out.
worries. Yeah.
If you want to join a room, I could sit here and watch the main room. That might be a better use of your time. No.
It doesn't matter. My role was to stay here and make sure people who join late get into a room and no one gets lost.
Okay. If you want to tag out at any point, just grab me and summon me
Okay.
back to the main room. Cool.
Sounds good.
I'll find my way.
Okay.
Oh, we were mid-sentence. Sorry. Um,
We were also mid-sentence, so
I'm
apologies
sure
to
we
folks,
all
but I
were
think,
mid-sentence.
yeah.
Know that this is really like just deeply, deeply exciting for us to have this degree of engagement. And we know that this was a very small window for a lot of people to get a full discussion. It really is, I hope, a enticement to come to the in-person meetings if you can, um, and know that there will be much broader opportunities for every voice to be heard and recorded. So I'm sorry if there were folks who had their hands up in my group we didn't get to. Geet, you're muted. Are you talking to us?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just saying that some of the discussion points that we were working through felt really important. And
Yep, me
so
too.
we can also carry this conversation into that next public meeting as well. So we can have like a station there that starts to talk about some of these like I think there was just like the positive stories, the challenges, you know, I think that all of that will still be, there'll still be an opportunity to continue the conversation.
We are back in a place where we can use the chat. So also if you want to add something that you're like, here's a really important success story that I want to include, or here's a location that I'm really excited about, you can pop that in the chat. We get the chat with the recording. Now that we're a full group, we get the chat as a recorded piece as well. So that's a really great, backup place for communication, let's say. I'm gonna share my screen again. Are we gonna do a little, how are we time-wise? We're pretty
We have
good.
like 15 minutes.
Someone's asking, what were the other group topics? We were doing, that was exactly, and will the night whiteboard notes be shared? Yes. The other topics, I don't know, I'll just note the 3 topics were cultural conservation, which was our kind of stand-in a little bit for land, but also thinking about conservation as it's related to human land interface. So agriculture, among other things, was one of the things that we were really focusing on. We also touched a little bit on wetlands. There was water, so cultural conservation, water conservation, and habitat and species. So we tried to kind of understand something that we know is ultimately interlinked and highly integrated, but to give a little bit of a frame, for a distinct frame to each of those conversations. We will have notes from this meeting that will be shared as well. So you'll get a taste of what those other conversations were through hopefully our relatively good note-taking. I'll just as I said, I'm gonna share screen if I can. There we are. Okay. Yeah, so you can see the cultural conservation, water conservation. Do you guys want to do a little report back?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. I don't know, we have covered so much ground, it's hard to like pinpoint exactly one thing, but I think that the one thing that really stands out quite a bit was or that a lot of the different, and this is sort of related to water, but this idea of like boundaries and runoff in relation to both runoff and political boundaries, that boundaries are, especially as it relates to conservation, and that conservation has the ability to actually have us pull away from those boundaries, and to understand sort of conservation and how neighbors are impacting neighbors, and thinking about sort of how can we create recommendations that address this idea of both those boundaries, or sort of disintegrating those boundaries in a really positive way. Especially given that water is, boundaryless. In addition, lots of other stuff was said though.
I'll note that we started off with, I think, an interesting frame, which was to think about what had drawn people or what people loved about their part of Columbia County or Columbia County more broadly. What creates the identity of this place, and how is that identity in part being transformed? It needn't always be negative, but in some ways, what was so compelling about it, its bucolic rural area, is now being its success is what's engendering its transformation.
Mhm.
And so I think that's true, particularly people that we're talking about, thinking about its history as primarily farming, dairy farmer, to now different kind of farming. Certainly development pressures came up. Um, and what are the tools to make things actually work, right? So we can make a conservation plan, we can do the best set of recommendations. We need to have municipal governments on board. We need them to have the ability to act, the ability to spend funds, to ensure that we have not a kind of piecemeal death by 1,000 cuts in areas that are vulnerable. Those are just a few of the conversations that we had that were, as I said, I felt like we were in the midst of something, but very inspiring. I'll pass it to Jennifer.
Great. Yeah. Our group largely talked about land use, and so obviously agriculture is a big part of the land use equation, and talked about the value of agriculture that can be compatible with biodiversity, and sort of thinking about how we might do that, and also thinking about agrivoltaics, and so solar farms that are also serving as areas either where sheep may be grazing or other kinds of farming is happening, and particularly looking to lands that are currently just not being, they're open fields, say, that aren't being used for anything, but could, rather than be developed, could be used for agrivoltaics. We did also talk about development and the challenges there around obviously biodiversity protection. And some of the other issues that came up were things like deer, and the fact that overbrowsing is an ongoing challenge, and invasives are also an ongoing challenge. And then we also just talked a little bit about thinking at the watershed scale, and how really it's all connected, and how what we do on the land sort of impacts the entire watershed. And so really thinking holistically about the watershed and water quality, and cleaning up the river, but also again acknowledging that the watershed is all connected.
Well, this is not a wrap-up question. We know that. Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about this, or do you want us to chat a little more? Or are you ready to say a few final remarks? And then we'll talk next steps after this.
Yeah, if you want to chat more about this question, and we have a little bit of time before we move to next steps, but
Sure. I'll just note that this is really a teaser for the plan overall, and for the kinds of conversations that we'll have plenty of time for in our in-person meetings, but also really thinking about some of the key like I want to say framing devices for the conservation plan. One is the question about timing. What is our time frame? And then prioritization. This is like distilling into a single priority over a single point in time. The conservation plan is going to be doing a very detailed and again very nuanced assessment that is going to seek to map out priorities in a kind of constellation way, again, without there'll be to some degree a hierarchy, because we need to say these are key places, but that it's going to have, and that's again part of the conversations with you, is determining how your values and the understanding of your region and the kind of identity of the county are going to help shape that prioritization process. And I think, that's 20 years out. certainly we're also looking 5 years down the road. Part of the conversation that we had in our meeting was the urgency, where we can see land that is currently vulnerable that we know is key, whether for habitat corridor, whether it's adjacent to a swamp, whether it's a view shed. So we're not looking only to that, the 20-year mark, but understanding that there are a series of benchmarks along the way as well. I don't know. Anyone want to add anything else before I move on to
No, I
next?
think that we put this up here as a teaser because we will engage with you around this question in the future, whether it be through the survey that's going to be put out, through the next public meeting. And so if you want to sort of think about that, because it's sort of a big question, we felt like it was a little too big to sort of have everybody feel like they could come up with an answer right away. So we sort of put that out there as a teaser to have you sort of think about it. And maybe it's a good question to think about with your neighbors and, with other people within your jurisdiction.
All right.
Yeah.
So really, I know we've said it a number of times. Please join us at the next meeting in person in May 3rd. Put it on your calendar. I think by having been part of this meeting, of course, you're already going to be sent an invitation to that. As soon as we have the full survey, I ask you please to jump on that and give us some data that we can crunch, and we can also report back with that data for our next meeting. We haven't, I'll defer to Sam on how we might do additional signups for emails and further announcements. And then really the other important thing is it felt like we have a very knowledgeable group of people on this call right now, but we also need other people who may not already have the bug in their bonnet or the bee in their bonnet, but who have key opinions, who have expertise, who have insight. We want as many people as possible to participate in this process. So please spread the word. That's to the folks that you know in your community, your friends, your neighbors, the people that you drink coffee with that may or may not. Again, it's an opportunity. I think, Jennifer's point about we need to be talking to each other. Education came up in our conversation. You can use this. Hey, there's an amazing conservation plan being developed for our county. That might also be a kind of threshold conversation about what values you'd like to see happen, beyond the conservation plan itself. So it's just maybe a jumping off point for these kinds of conversations that we need to have more broadly. So, and with that, I see a hand. Yes.
Hi, I just, to that point on how we can more effectively, based on your experience, engender more excitement and involvement in this, because, we shared a lot of by email on different groups like the County Climate Smart Task Force, which I'm on. I shared it with them. We did it with the Environmental Management Council for the county, that as well. I was just thinking there are other ideas that you may have, and maybe letting us know how we can really get the word out more. I totally agree with you. Anybody you talk to, just grab their arm in a nice tell them, come on.
Come on.
Just trying to think of a more critical mass to try to get, because we really want to have maybe not people who also just have a stake in all this, even if they don't
Absolutely.
background. And I'd like to have more of the community involvement. I think this is a great start, but do you have any other ideas that you can share with us now, or maybe later after, when you send around the links to this recording?
Yes. I mean, one, I'll have to say, as much as we all love and value Zoom for all the useful things it does, it is not the most scintillating place for a community meeting. We'll just, we'll put it out there. So I think calling it a town hall, was a teaser. It's the trailer for the great movie, hopefully. So our plan is to make the in-person meetings fun, that they're engaging, they're an opportunity for people to understand new things about where they live, but also to bring their expertise to bear in a physical way on maps. And our experience with people with mapping is that it is I don't know, I was gonna say it's transformative. Maybe that's maybe too broad, too ambitious of a word, but I think people do really get excited. Oh, this is where I live. And oh, understanding suddenly that they're within a watershed, or that their tiny creek in their backyard is actually ultimately does end up at the Hudson, not that far away. And, what are the implications of that? What does it mean for them to understand their small scale flooding is interconnected with the flooding that happens within the county as a whole, and their opinion can help make change around that. So I guess when you talk to people, tell them it's not going to be Zoom. Tell them that it's going to be a fun event. There's going to be some food, and we talked about doing a mapping exercise for kids as well. So I think the in-person interactive part of the next phase of this is I think well suited to people outside of those of us who already know the language, if that's a good way to pitch it.
I would sort of also add that, I mean, we are, unfortunately, we can't be in like 400 places at the same time. Maybe in some future world we will be able to, but that being said, like, we also feel like we are just a part of the process. This is really, sort of being shepherded by Columbia Land Conservancy. And in addition, like, ideally it is sort of owned by Columbia residents and the entire county. So hopefully we can start to build like an ambassadorship of people who are sort of a broader spokesman group that can really bring other people into the process. And maybe that means that we provide a little bit of a handout with some details so people can have talking points when they are talking to their neighbors or friends or people who sort of may be peripherally interested but not totally into it quite yet, right? But we can sort of give some further information to be able to help everybody sort of bring everybody together. It's a group effort.
With that, I'll put up our contact information here. So if you want to reach out to us, if you have more questions, you have an idea, you're like, oh, this ambassadorship, sign me up. I want the tear sheet and the little maps. Cool. Yeah, reach out to us. We're percolating ideas as we speak. So
With that, we can hand it over to you, Sam. Do you have any closing remarks you want to impart?
Sure, thanks. Yes, I think I just want to run through a few next step items that we briefly touched on the last slide, but we have a date for the next in-person meeting on May 3rd. The time and location are to be determined, but we'll be sure that an announcement goes out with those details as soon as we have them. By joining this Zoom tonight, we collected, your contact information through registration. So we'll be sure that everyone here who attended and participated receives an invitation to that event and future events. And that might be an opportunity to provide updates as well. And then please do look out for the survey. We'll be sure to send that around to this group and broadcast it more widely across, CLC channels and on our website, and really try to get that out into as many places, into as many people as possible. I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight and participating. And it sounded like people had a lot of meaningful thoughts to share, and it's exciting to have this many people join a call. So with that, I'll just say thanks and see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, really appreciate your time, everyone. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Hopefully we'll meet you all in person.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks,
Great.
everybody.
All right, bye.
Sam,
yeah, we'll stick on.
I am hoping that I can access the whiteboard from my breakout room.
Oh, like, do you want to screenshot it?
Yeah, I didn't do it during the,
Oh, did it go? I don't.
and it disappeared. And last time I actually managed to screenshot it before it ended, and this time I did not.
It might show up in the recording or like in Sam's storage of the Zoom.
I'm
Can
trying
you,
to
you can assign yourself to, the room 2 is still existing.
Oh,
Okay.
Maybe
So,
you can go to it right now.
smart.
that's
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
so
I'm
if
gonna-
I hit breakout rooms and go to it and then do a screenshot,
I think so.
I see. Okay, room 2. Okay, yep, I'm gonna go there and see if I can get it. Oops, wait.
Excellent.
Recreate, let's see. Oh, I'm gonna open all the rooms. I don't know if that means you're gonna go back there too. Sorry. I'm just gonna open.
That's okay. We can say no, but you can, yeah.
Okay,
We can say not now, but you can, right? You should be able to go. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
All right, everybody. Good job. Thanks,
Yeah, it sounded
Sam.
like the breakout rooms were ripe with.
It was great.
I
Yeah,
kind of
had a lot-
blindly hit it at 7:10 and was wondering, I'm sure I'm disrupting something.
Yeah.
You know, just get going. And
Yeah, it was fine because we wrapped up on time, so that was
Yeah,
also good.
I think that's more important.
I mean, I could have talked for like another half hour easily, if
Yeah.
not more.
Yep.
But we can talk about next, like I think layering some of that process into the next meeting just makes a lot of sense.
Cool.
I
Yeah,
agree.
great. Have a great evening.
Yeah, do we know if Jen, I think
No,
once I
no,
end,
she hasn't
once
come
I
back.
end this,
You have to
she's
wait for
gonna
it to come
just,
back. Otherwise
everything will be gone. And we don't know, but I will share, I'll have to look at what Zoom produces for me, but I'll share the transcript and then the recording as well as soon as we have that downloaded and in a shareable form. I'll have to look in there and see what they did with the breakout rooms, if it's just like 25 minutes of me sitting in a room with
Right.
2 other blank screens or whatever, but we'll try to cut that out. But
Right.
Oh, she's back.
Success?
nope.
Oh,
Oh, no.
But Sam, I wonder if you go to room 2, if you might be able to do it, because it says if you're signed in that maybe,
Oh,
but
maybe-
because you weren't in my group, I have a feeling it's just gone.
That's weird that it wouldn't save it.
Well, I went to
I think that
existing
Zoom would be smart
whiteboard.
enough by now.
No, well, I went to existing whiteboards and it says sign in.
oh, well, maybe
I'm not
then-
signed in.
whiteboards, sign in.
It says the host can share. Anybody can initiate.
Says,
All whiteboards created in the meeting will belong to the host.
Yeah,
I
I
saved
suspect Sam will be like,
it says they're saved automatically.
yeah, if you go like when we close out of this, Sam, maybe when you just log into your Zoom, there might be like, you know how everything gets stored somewhere, both the
Yeah.
chat and the video.
It's gonna be stored too.
Yeah.
I hope
Yeah.
so, but it might not be since I wasn't signed in and Sam wasn't in the meeting, but maybe not, maybe it doesn't matter. I don't
I
know.
think
I don't think it
if he's
matters.
the meta host, it should be.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
Google,
I hope you can access it. Otherwise, I'll try to go in memory, but I'm not going to remember everything.
yeah, no worries. I Google says it should be in my Zoom account, so we'll
Okay,
hope Google is
perfect.
right this time.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank
All
you very
right,
much.
guys, thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everyone.